Do you want to share any of the experiences that you had personally, as much as you feel comfortable, that led you to form this project with your co-founder?
Sure. I talk about this a lot. I'm happy to share my story, and I really feel like it's one of empowerment. I mean, I want to empower other clerks to speak out and file complaints and share their stories. So I'm happy to share mine. So I started my clerkship in August of 2019, and pretty much just weeks into the clerkship, my judge began to discriminate against me based on my gender and harass me and just generally mistreat me. He would kick me out of the courtroom and tell me I made him uncomfortable, and he just felt more comfortable with my male co-clerk. Told me I was aggressive and nasty and a disappointment. The day I found out that I'd passed the DC bar exam, he called me into his chambers, got in my face, and told me, "You're bossy." And I know bossy because my wife is bossy. And it was just,
Wow.
yeah, it was just devastating. I mean, I remember just crying in the courthouse bathroom, crying myself to sleep at night. I wanted to be reassigned to a different judge, but we didn't have an employee dispute resolution plan in place in my courthouse in 2019 that would have enabled a reassignment. So I tried to stick it out because I just desperately wanted to be a homicide AUSA in the DC US Attorney's Office, and I needed that year of experience, and I needed a reference from a judge. So we eventually transitioned to remote work. During the pandemic, I moved back to Philly to stay with my parents. And from mid-March till late April, the judge basically ignored me till he called me up in late April and told me he was ending my clerkship early because I made him uncomfortable and lacked respect for him. So I reached out to DC Court's HR, and they told me there was nothing they could do because HR doesn't regulate judges and that judges and law clerks have a unique relationship. And then they asked me, didn't I know that I was an at-will employee? It took me about a year to get back on my feet after that. I connected with some other DC judges who directed me to the DC Commission, where I ultimately filed my complaint. So I drafted it, but I wanted to wait to file it till I had a new job because I feared the judge would retaliate against me. So I secured my dream job in the DC US Attorney's Office, moved back to DC in July of 2021, and I was 2 weeks into training when I was told the judge had made negative statements about me during my background investigation, that I wouldn't be able to obtain a security clearance, and that my job offer was being revoked. So a couple days later, an interview offer for a different position with the USAO was also revoked based on the judge's same negative reference. I mean, I was 2 years out of law school, and the judge just seemed to have such enormous power over my life, my career, and my reputation.
Right. So this went beyond just being a negative personal experience. It turned into a negative professional experience.
Yes. And that's one of the things, the long-term like retaliatory relationship, the long-term negative relationship is something I'm really trying to raise awareness of, that it goes so far beyond just a chamber's poor relationship with the judge.
You know, I'm sure at some point the judges, your former judge's other colleagues, the judicial colleagues, learned of these allegations and policed their own and set them aside and had a good talking to, right? The judges kind of discipline their own, don't they?
Oh gosh, I wish. Judges are notoriously unwilling to discipline their own. And in the DC courts, I mean, bar associations do promulgate rules that kind of say judges should police their own. If a judge becomes aware of a colleague's misconduct or a judge's poor health, that they are obligated to report on this. But my former judge's colleagues protected him till the bitter end. And
how do you know that?
You know, to the extent I am aware of folks who spoke with the commission during the investigation, and I can't comment too deeply on that, but I'm aware that his colleagues protected him, which I find particularly troubling. I've said publicly, there are judges on the bench in DC right now who've committed misconduct. There are judges on the bench who protected my misbehaving former supervisor's misconduct until the bitter end. We're on the bench right now who have not been investigated. And I mean, what I've said to the DC Commission since this time, and what I've said to the DC courts to the extent they listen to my public statements, is that by mishandling these types of judicial complaints, the commission and the courts chill future complaints by law clerks against judges because they get the message, don't bother coming forward, don't bother filing a complaint, your reputation will be destroyed and nothing will be done. And I just think that's enormously troubling. I share my story in the hopes that it'll empower others to speak out. But as I do, I understand I'm talking about all these terrible things that happened to me. And what are law clerks going to think? I mean, are they going to be empowered, or are they just going to be fearful? So,
Well, let me ask you on this point. Let me say two things. First, let me just say, as an older lawyer, I'm so sorry you went through this and that there wasn't a mechanism in place to be there for you. So I'm just so sorry to hear about this. And let me ask, in addition to cataloging some of the horror stories of clerkships, is part of your project going to do anything to memorialize or highlight happy and positive experiences by law clerks?
definitely. So yes, the Legal Accountability Project, we're working on a couple fall initiatives. The first one is a centralized clerkships reporting database. And I think I should back up because I haven't really explained the process by which folks get clerkships. Right now, there is no way for law clerks to know who the good judges are to apply to and who the misbehaving ones are to avoid, unless they are through whisper networks of other former clerks reaching out to someone who's going to give them the full scoop, going to say, this judge is great, absolutely apply to them, or this judge harasses his clerks, never, ever apply to them. So what I'm seeking to do is kind of combat those whisper networks and centralize the information. So our centralized clerkships reporting database will enable every former and current clerk from every law school to make a report about their clerkship. Good, bad, medium. We want to hear all of them. And every law student at every institution will be able to read the reports and know who they should apply to and who they should avoid. And we're working with law schools because we want to capture the full scope, the good, the bad, the medium. We don't want to just put up a website and let people report randomly, because what I know is that in those types of circumstances, we'll get the people with the terrible experiences, some, or the people who are raving about the judge. We want to get the full scope. But yes, absolutely, right. We want to get the good ones too. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's not just good and bad. There's other qualities of judges in terms of making a love connection between a judge and a clerk, like judges that maybe would give a clerk more courtroom experience or more writing experience, or is more close supervision as opposed to a hands-off, those kinds of qualities, right?
That's correct, yes. And those are the types of questions we ask about in our survey database. We elucidate that kind of information as well, yes.
All right. And will I be able, as a member of the public, to access this database and learn all the backstories behind a judge I'm about to appear in front of as a lawyer?
Yeah, I love the roving room.
You will not unless you decide to change your career and go clerk for a year. No, so the database will be accessible to former clerks who've filed a report, law students whose schools are participating in the database initiative, and to law school administrators and deans to the extent they want to read the reports. It will not be publicly accessible. Judges will not be able to read the reports. We anticipate that most law clerks will report anonymously, and that is fine. And I am personally very sensitive to fears about reputational harm or retaliation based on my personal experience. It's really just about centralizing and democratizing the information so that we stop seeing these really troubling silo effects whereby a couple schools are hoarding information that they know about misbehaving judges. Sometimes they warn students, sometimes they don't. But for the 5 or so that collect this information, that does nothing for the thousands of law students who apply each year to clerkships and who are unwittingly walking into hostile work environments just because their law school has decided not to maintain any sort of internal database. And it has nothing to do with the ranking of the school, the geographic location. It is totally random which schools are doing a good job of protecting their students and which ones, frankly, are doing a terrible job.
You have just listened to the California Appellate Podcast, a discussion of timely trial tips and the latest cases and news coming from the California Court of Appeal and the California Supreme Court. For more information about the cases discussed in today's episode, our hosts, and other episodes, visit the California Appellate Law Podcast website at calpodcast.com. That's calpodcast.com. Thanks to Jonathan Caro for our intro music. Thank you for listening, and please join us again.